The AAA space is where most of the action tends to be, but the AA space is where our hearts often beat the loudest. This, after all, is the space where you don't typically have to worry about games being unnecessarily bloated, or games crumbling under their own gargantuan budgets and development cycles, or games that are unafraid to take risks and be experimental. That last bit is, in fact, where we're focused on for this feature, as we go into what we feel are some of the most unique AA games we've ever played. And before we go ahead, do keep in mind that calling a game AA or AAA isn't a measure of its popularity or quality so much as it is a measure of the scope of its production and its development budget, which means we might also talk about AA experiences made by companies that usually operate in the AAA sphere. And with that out of the way, let's dive right in. Disco Elysium. You could call Disco Elysium a CRPG, and on paper, technically you would be correct. But that would also be an incredibly reductive way to describe this masterpiece, from its surreal setting to its heavily flavored and thematically dense writing.
Must be the infernal machine, that toy from Oblivion. The Caprice Kinema motor carriage. In the cabin, you are welcomed by a set of steering wheels.
From its complete lack of combat to how bizarrely yet ingeniously it uses its RPG mechanics in conjunction with its storytelling, Disco Elysium is a singular game that's unlike anything else out there. Oxenfree. The original Oxenfree remains a fan favorite even today, and it's easy to see why, with its captivating story and techno-horror atmosphere living long in the memory. But of course, what made the game really stand out was its unique dialogue system. It's rare to find a game where conversations between characters flow as naturally as they do in Oxenfree, in spite of how frequently player input is required. Seamlessly blending storytelling and gameplay is no easy task, yet Oxenfree makes it look effortless.
The gate you opened.
The girl.
Outer Wilds. There's nothing we can say about Outer Wilds at this point that hasn't been said a million times before. With the sci-fi masterpiece widely regarded as one of the greatest games in years, and of course the sheer uniqueness of the experience had a big hand to play in how successful the game was. A rich setting, a captivating central mystery, a ridiculously addictive core gameplay loop, and a time loop conceit to tie it all together. Outer Wilds is a rare case of a game that not only has the bravery to think outside the box, but is also good enough to bring its insane ideas to life in an actual well-made video game. Viewfinder.
It's been a while since someone's wandered around this place. And wanderers are always welcome.
Viewfinder might not be the best puzzle game you'll ever play, with many of its critics saying it doesn't take its central premise as far as it could and should have. But there's absolutely no denying how different and fresh it is as a concept. Every time we see it in action, it's hard not to be floored by how flawlessly and seamlessly it's executed. On paper, even trying to describe Viewfinder's core photography-related mechanics can be a little perplexing, but actually seeing it in action is nothing short of magical. Astrobot Rescue Mission. A 3D platformer. What's so unique about that? That's ultimately what Astrobot Rescue Mission is. An excellent one, yes, but we've had 3D platformers before, right? Well, not like this one, because with Astrobot Rescue Mission, Sony took an experimental, small-scale idea and turned it into the best realization of a virtual reality platformer that anyone could have dreamed of. Not only is Rescue Mission just an incredibly designed and spectacularly fun game to play, it also constantly uses VR in creative and innovative ways that remain central to the gameplay experience. We've literally played nothing else like it since. Demon's Souls 2009. Sure, From Software and its Souls-likes have become a household name in gaming circles by this point, but back in 2009, that couldn't be further from the truth. From Software was a fairly niche Japanese studio, and Demon's Souls was a pretty low-budget, experimental project, never mind the fact that it was being bankrolled and published by PlayStation. Even with that smaller scope of production, however, Demon's Souls managed to take the industry by storm by literally creating an entire subgenre that's currently perhaps one of the most popular genres of games in the industry right now. Concrete Genie. The very definition of an overlooked gem, Pixelopus and Sony's charming action-adventure title launched for the PS4 back in 2019, and was sadly lost in the shuffle of larger and flashier games. Those who have played it, however, will tell you that it deserved far more attention.
Hey, over here!
Not only was it an incredibly creative and enjoyable gameplay experience, it was also a surprisingly heartwarming one, deserving of far more success. To make matters worse, developer Pixelopus was shut down in June last year. Remnant from the Ashes. There's absolutely nothing about a third-person shooter, and obviously at this point, there's absolutely nothing unique about a Souls-like. Back in 2019, however, as a third-person shooter Souls-like, Remnant from the Ashes was the first of its kind, or at least the first to do both of those things equally well. Gunfire Games' action title took many by surprise, delivering a genuinely thrilling and challenging dose of action combined with Souls-like progression and structuring. It is, in fact, still one of the best non-From Software Souls-likes out there, though perhaps many would argue that it has been bested by its sequel. Hades. Story and storytelling have long been the lowest possible priority for roguelikes and roguelites, almost as a rule, because the whole point of the genre was, after all, to not fuss too much over story or even a set structure, and instead offer an endlessly repeatable mechanics-focused gameplay experience. Hades decided to flip the script by not only telling a good story in spite of being a roguelike, but actually using its roguelike structure to tell its story as well as it did. Even those who don't usually enjoy roguelikes can, and have, fallen in love with Hades, which, in and of itself, is pretty darn unheard of. Jant. As the studio behind games such as Life is Strange and Tell Me Why, Don't Nod isn't exactly the sort of studio you would expect to see a puzzle platformer from, but last year, that's exactly what the studio delivered with Jant. And as those who have played it will tell you, it was a successful experiment. With an excellent climbing system serving as its primary highlight, Jant crafts a gameplay experience that doesn't resemble much else out there, where each action you take, from grabbing handholds to slowly making your way up the face of a cliff, feels immensely fun and satisfying, while all of it also blends with the game's zen atmosphere incredibly well too. Pikmin 4. Pikmin as a whole is one of the weirdest concepts we've ever seen in gaming, but we're going with Pikmin 4 here, because it manages to introduce enough bizarre new elements to feel alien in spite of being the fourth installment in a long-running and beloved franchise. The core gameplay loop of Pikmin obviously remains the strangest take on the real-time strategy genre to date, but when you throw in elements like its whimsical cast of characters, how much charm every nook and cranny of every environment in the game is stuffed with, or the fact that you can ride around on an adorably two-legged dog that goes on to sprout a leaf for a tail, Pikmin 4 quickly becomes the weirdest game in this already strange series. Ringfit Adventure. A game that's ultimate goal is to make you exercise and lose calories shouldn't be as well designed and fun to play as Ring Fit is. Nintendo obviously has a habit of making unique games that revolve around physical activities and require special accessories to be played. But Ring Fit Adventure touched unprecedented heights. Not only is it an incredibly effective exercising tool, it's also a genuinely well-made RPG. We might say that we never thought making a good exercising RPG would be possible, but to be fair, we didn't even think anyone would ever feel the need to make one, so... It Takes Two. Co-op games have been around for as long as games have been around, but have they ever really cared about telling a story? After all, the very act of playing with a friend can make it difficult to focus on or even care about a cutscene or conversations between characters. It Takes Two, however, accomplishes that, and with great aplomb, much like Hazelight's previous game, A Way Out did. On top of that, it also boasts genuinely excellent level design and platforming mechanics. Hazelight has often taken pride in the fact that it's pretty much the only studio in the industry that's making the sort of games that it makes, and it's hard to argue against that notion.
How comes you get all the cool gadgets?
Because I'm cooler than you, Cody.
Psychonauts. You'll rarely play 3D platformers as off-the-wall insane as Psychonauts was. Its 2021 sequel was of course also an excellent game that was similarly bursting with creativity, but back when the first Psychonauts came out, it was entirely unlike anything else out there. From its character designs and art style to its sense of humor and surprisingly mature narrative themes, from its brilliant writing and captivating story to how endlessly creative each of its mental worlds were, Psychonauts was an absolute breath of fresh air, built on a far lower budget than most other major 3D platformers of that era. SEFU.
I don't want to be like, who in the fuck?
SEFU might be a brawler at its core, but nearly just as important to the larger experience is the game's roguelite structure and aging mechanic. The latter in particular works wonderfully well with how brutally challenging the game can be because of how it embellishes the aging system's risk-reward elements. All of that is, of course, elevated by the fact that in terms of just pure quality, you're not going to find many brawlers that are better at what they do than SEFU is. And with that, we reached the end of the video. Have anything to say? Let us know in the comments below. Also, we upload new videos every single day on GamingBolt, so please consider subscribing as it really helps us out. Thanks for watching.